Chapter 38. The court finally settled. The long-awaited verdict was minutes away. Some had called it the trial of the century. Others whispered it was really the trial of the victim. Whatever labels the public had thrown at it, one fact remained. 12 strangers from different backgrounds, beliefs, and lives would now deliver the verdict. They had spent days walking the same path, hearing the same evidence, united only by the burden placed upon them. And now they would determine whether she was guilty of killing the love of her life or simply a tragic victim of circumstance. Rachel sat motionless at the defense table, a tremor rising slowly from her stomach to her throat. Her fingers drifted instinctively to her belly, pressing gently against the curve that protected the only piece of Edward she had left. Its father was gone by her own hand, and now this child, who had not yet taken its first breath, stood on the edge of losing its mother too. Her pulse pounded in her ears. What kind of life awaits this child if I am convicted? She blinked rapidly and forced the thought away. She could not afford to spiral. All she could do was wait for the verdict of the 12 people who now held her life in their hands. The bailiff stepped forward. "May the defendant please rise?" Her legs trembled as she pushed herself upright, Emmanuel rising beside her. She was too afraid to look at the jury, too afraid to look at Edward's family in the gallery, their eyes boring into her. All she could do was stand there and wait for the words that would divide her life into before and after. The judge turned his gaze towards the jury. Lance's Adam's apple bobbed as he stood. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Olam asked. Lance nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." The room fell into complete stillness. Everyone held their breath. Even the bailiff, usually detached, seemed drawn into the gravity of the moment. The judge gave a small nod. "What say you in the case of the Crown versus Rachael Brown?" Lance Jersey took a deep breath, his fingers gripping the edge of the jury box. A long, torturous, and endless pause followed. Then he spoke. "On the charge of involuntary manslaughter, we, the jury, find the defendant, Rachael Brown." He hesitated for only a fraction of a second, but to Rachel it stretched into eternity. "Guilty." A sharp collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Catherine Hale burst into tears, clutching her chest as though justice itself had reached out and touched her. Charlotte turned away, her hands trembling. Gerald eased back into his chair, tension leaving his shoulders in a quiet exhale, the faintest trace of satisfaction flickering across his face before he masked it. A broken sob tore from Rachel before she could stop it. Her knees buckled and Emmanuel caught her before she collapsed. Her body shook violently, racked with grief so deep that she could barely remain upright. She had hoped, somewhere deep inside, she had allowed herself one fragile belief that redemption might still be possible. She had prayed and felt peace, real peace, but now it felt shattered in her hands. She had believed they might see her truth, might understand she had never meant to kill him, might see the woman behind the crime. But none of it mattered now. Only one word remained. Guilty. Emmanuel tightened his grip on her shoulders, his voice barely a whisper. "Breathe, Rachel. Breathe." But she couldn't. She was drowning, suffocating beneath the weight of a future she no longer controlled. The hangman's shadow loomed over her and over the fragile life growing inside her. The judge raised his hand. "Order," he commanded, his voice steady. But nothing felt ordered anymore. When the gavel finally fell and the session ended, the heavy doors creaked open and the outside world rushed in. Heat, noise, chaos. The streets beyond the courthouse had become a different kind of battlefield. Reporters and protesters swarmed the pavement, their chants merging into a frenzied roar as cameras flashed in blinding bursts, turning the world into a staccato blur. Some in the crowd cheered what they saw as justice served. Placards lifted above the sea of faces, and on them, in bold, unforgiving letters, was a single word. Guilty, 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 another voice shouted. An eye for an eye. Others erupted in outrage, condemning the legal system for failing to recognize trauma survivors. To some, she was a killer. To others, a victim of a broken system. And Rachael felt abandoned by God, completely, unbearably abandoned. She understood the verdict, but where was God in all of this? She was led back to Stonebridge, away from the media storm, the questions, the flashes, the placards burning with rage. Hours later, she sat once more across from Emmanuel to talk about what came next. She barely felt her body beneath her, as though she had been hollowed out and left empty. Guilty. The word lodged itself deep in her mind, repeating over and over, cutting each time it echoed back. Guilty, guilty, guilty. A curse she could not outrun, heavier than the shackles on her wrists. It did not matter that the truth lay tangled somewhere far beyond what the jury could see. The word had been spoken. Now she had to live with it. The determination of your guilt is not the end, Rachael. It is the beginning of your redemption, Emmanuel said quietly. She blinked through the haze as he tightened his grip on her hands. There is hope for everyone who is guilty. There is a way out. You still have options. A shaky breath escaped her lips, and they will be presented in court. Her hands trembled as she wiped her tear-streaked face, but Emmanuel's voice remained firm, insistent. It is not the end, he stressed. You have to believe that even now, all things are possible. She had thought the trial was the end, that the world had already written her obituary. It could still mean the end of her life, especially with a new bill circling Parliament like a tightening noose. But maybe it was not too late. Salvation did not come before the fall. It came after, in the wreckage, in the ruins, where a person faced the only real choice: rebuild or be buried beneath what they had done. Long after Emmanuel left, his words settled deep in her chest, filling the emptiness with something unfamiliar. She was guilty of thrusting the knife, guilty of surrendering to a past that had stalked her from the shadows. But she was not beyond redemption, at least not in the eyes of the man who had believed in her until his final breath. The press, however, had no space for grace. Their verdict was swift, merciless, and relentless. The evening bulletins rolled across every major channel, her name splashed across tickers and headlines. Amy White, the same anchor who had first reported the stabbing months earlier, spoke again, her crisp delivery slicing into living rooms across the country. It's just reaching us that Rachael Brown, of Nigerian heritage, has been found guilty of the manslaughter of media mogul Edward Hale. The words carried a finality that left no room for nuance. She recounted the grisly details, the emergency call, the failed surgery, as footage of the Hale mansion and an old smiling photograph of Edward filled the screen. Then, without pause, the broadcast pivoted. And in other news, Amy continued smoothly, we are receiving reports tonight of a scandal gripping Westminster. A video circulating on social media appears to show Conservative MP Jack Smith in a compromising moment with Amanda Hughes, the wife of the current Minister of Justice. The screen lit with grainy stills, footage from an influencer's live stream, originally meant to review a Soho restaurant. In the background, Jack Smith walked past, hand in hand with Amanda Hughes. Seconds later, unaware of the camera, they paused beneath a neon sign and kissed. That brief moment, caught on a shaky smartphone feed, ignited the internet within hours. Clips were shared and dissected. Social media exploded with hashtags like Justice Affair, Jack and Amanda, Minister's Wife. Memes spread like wildfire. Commentators filled YouTube and late-night panels, speculating about the minister's future, Smith's career, and a government already wobbling under pressure. The scandal devoured everything. News cycles pivoted instantly. Public attention moved with ruthless speed. Oscar Dupont, the investigator hired by Jack Smith, watched the broadcast from the corner of a pub, pint frozen halfway to his lips. By morning, this would be the only story anyone cared about. It was explosive, scandalous, political gold. Compared to this, his client's request to dig dirt on Jonathan vanished into irrelevance. Worse, it rebounded like a bad joke. Did Jack not know that people in glass houses should never throw stones? He exhaled through his nose, almost laughing, and reminded himself he had at least taken payment up front. Something told him Jack would not be needing his services again. Outside, the city buzzed with scandal, the air thick with whispers and speculation. Inside Stonebridge, Rachel sat in silence, her name already slipping down the headlines, eclipsed by Westminster's newest fall from grace. My God, why have you abandoned me? I have cried desperately for help, but still it does not come. Psalm 22, verse 1.